Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. One of those matchups that we've been kind of circling since early January. Mario Cristobal, the Miami Hurricanes, heading on the road to play this Florida Gators program week one. Want to take a look at least in my mind, some of the biggest keys for this Miami Hurricanes program to go on the road, get it done against the Florida Gators. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of Florida fans that are listening to this as well. We're going to do the exact same thing, but from the lens of this Florida Gators program as well, because at the end of the day, both of these programs, both of these teams, they're going to have stuff they want to exploit heading into this week one matchup. Really excited to get into it. Now, before we do, and as always, the number one rule, let it fly in the comments section. I mean, a lot of Miami fans down there, a lot of Florida fans. That's the beauty of college football. That's the beauty of talking a game like a rivalry like this one. Would love to hear from you guys, whether you agree with me, whether you disagree. That's the beauty of this. So would love to hear from you guys in the comments section. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. Let's start with, I think, by far the biggest matchup that Miami is going to look to exploit. And that's this Miami Hurricanes rushing attack. And I get that's a very surface level analysis to start this one off. But you make no mistake about it. This is one of the bigger, I think, mismatches that Miami's going to look to exploit against Florida. You go back to Miami in 2023, this was one of the better rushing attacks that we saw in the country. They averaged 5 yards per carry. That was 20th best in the country. You look at Mario Cristobal and say, this is where Miami has built this program over the last couple of years along the line of scrimmage, specifically on the offensive line. There's going to be a lot of chatter about quarterback Cam Ward, who we're going to talk about in just a minute, but you make no mistake about it. What does Mario Cristobal want to do on the road? It's running the football. And that's really, really important for this matchup for a couple of different reasons. One, you're going into one of the most rowdy environments in all of college football against the Florida Gators defense that struggled massively against the run last year, giving up 5.1 yards per carry. That was 117th in the country. So on paper, you look at one of these matchups that Miami is really going to look to, it's running the football. I mean, there's a reason they've grabbed Damian Martinez in the transfer portal. There's a reason they've invested so much on this offensive line. They want to run the ball, and this is a Florida program that in 2023 didn't show that they were great stopping the run. And I think on top of that, you look at Florida just losing one of their top interior defensive linemen, Jamari Lyons, a guy that sounded like he was really taking a step during this offseason. We've talked about this a lot for Florida. The Florida Gator fans certainly know we've talked about this. The depth on the inside of the defensive line. We think it's gotten better, but if you're the Miami Hurricanes, you certainly want to test that. You want to make this Florida Gators defense tackle Damian Martinez and Mark Fletcher 40-plus times a game. You want to see if you can get to that depth and kind of wear down this Florida Gators defense, specifically on the inside of this defensive line. And at the end of the day, if you're Miami and you can come in and run the football consistently, control the time of possession, that's the best way to neutralize what I think is going to be one of the more rowdy environments that we're going to see in college football all season long. So Miami running the football, I think that is massive in this matchup. Going to this number two key to the game, and I think another matchup that Miami will certainly want to exploit, and that is this pass rush against the Florida Gators offensive line that really struggled in 2023. You look at what Mario Cristobal has done, not only on the recruiting trail, but what he did in the transfer portal. He has built this Miami Hurricanes defense really along the front seven, specifically in that pass rush. I mean, you look at Ruben Bain or Tyler Barron or Akeem Mesidor, Elijah Alston, Simeon Barrow Jr. These are elite pass rushers all along this Miami Hurricanes defensive line going up against a Florida offensive line that, I've been pretty vocal, I think is going to get significantly better than it was in 2023. But if you're Mario Cristobal in Miami, you want to prove and make Florida prove that this offensive line got better in pass protection. Again, you look at the key for this Miami Hurricanes defense, not only week one against Florida, but really throughout the season, it's going to be getting after the passer. And you look at Florida, they're kind of mismatching on the offensive line. They bring in a couple transfers at the tackle position, kicking Damian George down to guard. There are a couple of spots against this Florida Gators offensive line that I think Miami can capitalize on. And I think why Miami's so suited to do so is they got pass rushers all along the defensive line. I mean, there are some elite pass rushers on the edge, obviously highlighted by guys like Tyler Barron and Ruben Bain, but you look on the inside, I mean, Simeon Barrow Jr. coming from Michigan State was one of the better interior defensive linemen in the pass rush department in the country last year. Akeem Mesidor, a guy that could play edge, could play the 3-tech, him as well. And so it's not only the edge rusher presence that you have in this pass rush. I think there's also significant difference makers in the pass rush on the inside of the defensive line. Can you find that weak link along this Florida Gators offensive line and really get after Graham Mertz? Massive storyline, because we all know Graham Mertz, when he was given time, was quite good last year. But when he wasn't given time, that's when this Florida offense really did struggle. Number 3, tackling in the secondary. This is probably the biggest question mark that we have for this Miami Hurricanes program. Not just tackling, but just what this secondary looks like as a whole. It's going to be a lot of new faces. It's going to be a lot of young talent. If you look at Florida and what they want to do on the offensive side of the football, you make no mistake about it. It's about getting the football out to their playmakers in space and letting them work after the catch. Florida had over 1,800 yards just after the catch last year. Getting it to Eugene Wilson, getting it to Elijah Badger, maybe even a guy like Tank Hawkins as a true freshman. That's what Florida is going to try to do. And they're going to try to force Miami in this young secondary, largely unproven secondary, to tackle some of these playmakers in space. Can Miami come up and do that? Because you look at Florida, I don't think they're going to try to attack the deeper third all that often in this matchup, because I don't think, or I'm not sure if Billy Napier and this staff have a ton of confidence that the offensive line is going to hold up. I think one of the best ways you can neutralize what I think is going to be an elite pass rush for this Miami Hurricanes program is getting the football out quick. And so if you're Miami, you have to make sure you're rallying to the football. This young secondary is going to need to make some plays in space, because you look at Florida, where their difference makers are and how they operate, it's with the football in their hands. Last key to the game, and I want to just kind of call the X factor of this matchup, that's Xavier Restrepo. You look at this Florida Gators defense, and one of those matchups that I think you're highlighting in this passing attack is Xavier Restrepo on that nickel defender for this Florida Gators program, where you look at Florida, they're going to have what I think is going to be 2 second-year nickels that are going to be playing significant reps for this Florida Gators defense, whether it's Sharif Denson, whether it's Aaron Gates. Aaron Gates is a guy that I'm high on Aaron Gates, but he hasn't played a ton of football. I'm really high on Sharif Denson. He's going to be a true sophomore. 2 young but talented nickelbacks going up against, at least in my opinion, one of the more crafty veteran wide receivers in Xavier Restrepo. If there's one of those matchups in this passing attack that if I'm Miami, I really want to exploit, it's Xavier Restrepo against this young secondary, specifically that nickel position for this Florida Gators program. This is kind of what it comes down to. I mean, I think there's a reason this line is at 2.5 points. This is going to be a close game, and I think a large part of this game is dependent on, how the game goes and what team is able to kind of get what they want to do done in this matchup. And so you look at Miami, if you can run the football, if you can get after the passer, if you can tackle these playmakers in space, that's going to mean good things for Miami. But on the flip side, if you struggle to run the football, if you struggle to tackle in space, that is a good thing for the Florida Gators. And so for this Miami Hurricanes program, those are some of those keys that I think are massive in this matchup. We'll cut it there. We'll run the same thing back for this Florida Gators program. Again, appreciate y'all rocking with the fellas. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.